Obama has some concerns about media coverage in America. The former president calling out what he sees as a double standard for the nonstop attention the doomed Titanic sub got versus the migrant boat that sank off the coast of Greece.
Obscene inequality, 24-hour coverage. And I understand it, of this submarine. At the same time, right here, just off the coast of Greece, we had 700 people dead. It's not dominating in the same way. And in some ways, it's indicative of the degree to which people's life chances have grown so disparate.
My eyebrows are so black.
Greg?
What?
What do you think of the point that Obama was making?
Well, this is like an old professor morality question, like, why do you care less about the death of a large group of people far away than someone you love? So it's a false comparison. In this case, you have one story of huge-scale tragedy in Greece, and you have another that is more intriguing because it's a sub that goes underwater, which they do, and risks people's lives. It's adventurous. So that makes it a more interesting, newsworthy story than the larger tragic one. A better comparison, I think, would be people who live safe lives but die at the hands of people who take risks. That's what, I mean, at least the people that died in the ocean didn't take anybody with them. The people that bother me the most are the people that he should be talking about, criminals. You know, people that kill innocent people. You know, he's been very quiet about some pretty big issues, and Professor Obama could really come out and make some, like, very, strong statements about the way the world's gone. He should be going on there and going, look at these people coming out of the stores with $900 worth of crap. That didn't happen when I was president. What the hell's going on? That's what I would like to hear. But instead of this kind of like, well, if they only cared more about faraway tragedies, it's like, okay, dude.
Dude, what do you think, Jesse?
Well, when you're the citizen of the world, you always think about the world instead of the United States. Remember, this is a guy whose father has roots in Africa. This is a guy who spent a lot of his childhood in Southeast Asia. Is that right? I think it's right. And then
he ate a dog, Jesse.
I didn't bring that up, but I'm glad you did. And then spent a lot of time in Hawaii. Was that the last state to get a star in the flag? Not so sure about that, but he's never really looking at things from an American perspective. He's always speaking to the world. Even when he's speaking to us, he's appealing to the world. So let me just tell you, this is not the BBC. CNN, Fox covered the story the same way. And here's why, from a raw news editorial standpoint. The Greek migrants that drowned, there was no Titanic angle. Number one, huge angle. Number two, we had guests that knew people that were submerged. Number three, there was suspense because we had the countdown to the air shutting down. And this was off our coast. This is not Greece. This is the United States of America. If there had been a Cuban boat that had capsized and there was Cubans who were drowning off the coast of Miami, that would have been wall-to-wall coverage. We don't live in Europe, Barack Obama. This is the United States of America. And it just shows how naive, detached, and how snobby he is to not understand that this is the United States, and as sad as it is, and it was a horrible story off the coast, this is not something that concerns most Americans in their spare time.
All right. He also, in the conversation, Dana talked about how he thinks that we're now far less tolerant of differing opinions, even than during his administration.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
He's talked about that before,
Yeah.
and in a way that even on the show, like we've said, he's making a good point. He's trying to tell the left, guys, you have to allow, especially like at college campuses, he's mentioned this before when his daughters were there in particular. On this issue, one of the things he left out of, or at least I didn't watch the whole interview with Christiane Amanpour, is that the super yacht purchased with money earned through capitalism was what helped save the people that were on the boat that he was concerned about. So they took the distress call. It wasn't government that went and saved those people that were in a desperate situation. It was somebody who had a caring heart who said, we have the means, we have the obligation as well, because they're out in the seas, they get a distress call. So they went there, and then that was one of the most compelling things also. And you can look at the inequality, sure. You have people who are desperate that are leaving Northern Africa or Syria, making that terrible decision to see, like, maybe we'll get on this boat, maybe we'll make it there to the mainland. but they know they're taking a huge risk, and they get saved by the super yacht. One of the things that, again, this goes back to the conversation we had just in the previous block, which is somebody like President Obama is in a wonderful position to help deal with the problems at their source, which is, why is everybody wanting to leave North Africa? Why are people still trying to flee Syria? They don't have rule of law. They don't have a hope. They don't have a future. They don't have any jobs. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to get to some place that is better. Our systems are better. We should try, I think, to help encourage those countries to do better for their people by doing what we do.
Awesome. Judge, final thoughts?
I agree with what Greg was saying about false comparisons. When I was the DA, one of the first cases I had involved a body, and it had been chopped up. And I remember calling the New York Times and saying, I need your help with this. You know, if we could get some coverage on it, I might be able to get some traction. And the question that they asked me was, did I think it was a famous or rich person? I will never, ever forget that. And that's when it made it clear to me that the things that get coverage, the things that people are interested in, are things that are, you know, affect people that we're not used to or that we're not used to seeing. And so we have become immune to people, the boats capsizing, to people, you know, suffering and dying on the way to it, trying to get to a new life. But I think it's really rich that it's Barack Obama, you know, the guy who went from 1.5 million net worth to now, I think it's more than $70 million net worth, where, you know, he's talking about the fact that, or when he created his, the Obama, I think, Center, 90% of the voters on the south side of Chicago were very upset about it and urged city officials to do more to create affordable housing because it was the Obama Center that was moving those people out of the south side of Chicago. And I think it's really rich for him to talk about all the division and the press and everything else when he was from Chicago, where there was so much crime and so many inner city kids in his own city. So he ought to maybe look in his own house a little bit before he starts criticizing people for being fascinated by what is truly a fascinating story.